This little masterpiece was released during my edgy teen phase, meaning that I wanted to watch Clash of the Titans over the better film. Better directed, better written, better everything. Little did I know. I was genuinely angry when the parents instead drove us to watch what I was quick to dismiss as the DreamWorks dragon movie for babies. Barely past the opening narration and I'm already being screamed at by the top tier direction. This happens.
Night Fury! Get down!
Naturally, I had to lock in. I don't know about you, but choosing a static camera to show action is a decision I don't often see taken in animated features due to this default impulse of having a constantly moving camera, so that static shot of the tower getting sniped by an invisible dragon really hit different, jarring in the best way, kind of like that one shot from Kung Fu Panda. Pure electroshock. It stood out. You might say that it activated my neurons. That shockwave is the cherry on top. Delicious. I also couldn't help but recall a certain sequence. Interesting. That shot was just the first of several instances through which director Dean DeBlois would establish himself as one of my favorite animation directors in the field. There are 3 stationary shots I can vividly recall reacting to on my first viewing. There's that one, the Red Death setting the boats ablaze, and Toothless diving in to save Hiccup from a pool of fire. I was utterly unfamiliar with this game. Is there something that I'm not being told? Does Lilo and Stitch have the sauce? Never saw it. Off topic. This movie's the best directed DreamWorks, perhaps head to head with Kung Fu Panda 2008, the first one, the best one. John Powell needs a raise. He who turns everything he touches into gold like some musical alchemist. John Powell changing lives once again is one of the film's many aspects that I'd be heartbroken to disregard, such as the genius screenplay, the powerful message about understanding the other side, changing a culture in the process, Nickel Marlet's quirky pen, and of course the genius screenplay depicting my favorite symbiotic friendship in any media. It brings me to tears. But it's Dean DeBlois' directional grasp on atmosphere that I chose to examine. By examine, I mean gush about for around 10 minutes. In a time when animated movies are encouraged to reject realism and to push stylistic boundaries, I sorta get looking back in annoyance at that DreamWorks Pixar era where realism was the main goal, where studios were almost homogenized by that shared artistic intention. That's of course until Spider-Verse came along and showed us the truth, actively refusing to submit to realism, but I feel that if there were one property that could justifiably strive for something slightly more grounded and subdued, it might be the Scandinavian set melodrama about the boy befriending the beast, but that's just me. I just find it amusing that this film, out of all things, is what got me acquainted to Roger Deakins, and it's his motivated lighting and naturalistic atmosphere that allows this film to stand out as much as it does amongst DreamWorks' pretty large repertoire of generally pretty-looking movies. Dean, Roger, and crew defined the line between creating something that looks pretty and conveying atmosphere above all else. It's also what allowed this film to age as well as it did, despite the limited amount of detail allowed for 3D models back in 2010. I noticed this tendency in animated movies of having each color pop out almost equally, creating this candy-like canvas. Think the average Illumination studio production. Not the worst thing in the world. I'd say Pixar often does it best, but it's by being exposed to movies like the Dragon Trilogy, choosing a palette with a distinct color varying across the story's emotional landscape akin to live action, that you start seeing the appeal in going that route. Look at how pretty gray can even look when you've got the right talent to pull it off. One of the many movies I use as an example to show how well a muted palette can work. It's those peak foggy autumnal vibes for the sad autistics in the audience. Absolutely no room for drabness in this 3D feature. You've got purples, blues, spicy reds. It's yellow mostly because Deakins loves his natural light. Besides, what else if not fire could have canonically served as a light source? That's whether it's from candles or the star of the show, which I feel could have easily turned out as generic or unmemorable by trying to replicate something more akin to what we've already seen countless times in movies or shows. That classic, almost tiresome dragon silhouette, but I think that having concept artist Nickel Marlet as part of the equation automatically cancels such an outcome. I think he's cursed with the funny hands. Man can't draw a straight line to save his life, so character artist for animation was obviously the most suitable career path to best utilize that blessed quirk. Now he's responsible for half of the aesthetic wealth of 2 of my favorite animated franchises. Most of that other half having to do with John Powell, evidently. I start thinking about if the task would have been offered to some other person, anyone really, however competent, and just start stressing due to the complete lack of a capacity to envision these movies without Nickel's precious stylistic signature. He allowed this whole franchise to preserve that children's book scribbly characteristic and to fuse that peculiarity to the edge and grit offered by Dean's direction and Roger's visual guidance is something nothing could have ever prepared me for as a teen, as a grown man. I tend to get lost in the frames, letting my eyes be guided by the satisfying curves shaping the dragons. Through my eyes, I can almost taste how fun the brainstorming process leading to those designs must have been. Those silhouettes were made to thrive within the exaggerated movements permitted by animation as proven by the synergy found in the final product. Only Nico knows the amount of skill it takes to create something that is both intrinsically cartoonish but also genuinely aesthetically appealing from sketches and onto the rendering engines. This isn't easy, but it's people like Nico that make it seem so. The insane part is that everything I just talked about, the aesthetics, the technical, the music, could have all been in the service of a lesser film. Many such cases. Things don't often all come together perfectly. Rise of the Guardians, or whatever that movie's called, also had the GOAT Deakins involved and was memorably scored by Oscar-winning composer Alexander Desplat. Why didn't the fan base span beyond Jack Frost fan cams and Tumblr posts? Where's the franchise? Aren't there other personified holidays worth recruiting? Oh look, they even used some of that How to Train Your Dragon score to try to leech off of its success.
You see, Jack can control the winter weather, ice and snow. Jack can conjure them up and bend them to his will.
See, you can have the best of the best creating something that looks and feels appealing on the surface, but attach it to a narrative not strong enough to elevate it, and you'll likely be left with the sort of film I often torture myself with, wishing that the screenplay, the main pillar, the most important part in all honesty, would have done it all better service. How to Train Your Dragon could have been victim of the same pitfalls, halting the franchise after the first entry. The dialogue could have been bad. There could have not been a compelling message. Hiccup could have been a lesser new addition to the pile of animated socially awkward teens. The characters could have sucked. The story, as an adaptation, could have been a failure. The sauce could have been lacking. Thankfully, Dean DeBlois and I share common grounds, and you can easily tell in the way he discusses narrative and the elements he chooses to emphasize when expressing what's best for the story and why. Stuff that make it obvious that the reasons behind us resonating with the film were probably done on purpose. Those same elements recurring later in the franchise, all directed by Dean, can also serve as a good enough indicator that he's just kind of onto something. I'll admit to sensing that the franchise probably lost a bit of that je ne sais quoi with co-director Chris Sanders' departure, feeling that the character writing suffered as the movies went on, but the directing, the mise en scène, on the other hand, triples in ambition and expertise by every film because we watched a man play with the same assets and improving over the span of a decade. Dean DeBlois needs to be put on that list of directors known for how well they evoke scale, among which are Denis Villeneuve, Spielberg, Gareth Edwards, and Big Jim himself. Not everyone's got it, but the way he animated and captured those Class 10 entities shows that the man should be given a kaiju project ASAP. Something about the way he talks about animation in real camera terms explains shots like this one, which just might be my favorite of the whole film. It's a huge pile to pick from in a movie so relentlessly well crafted. That's why I get real depressed when I hear stuff like, it was pretty good for an animated movie. Some people don't carry any real ill intent stating such a thing. Others genuinely see animation as a lesser art form. Keep an eye on how people holding this mentality engage with art. They lost my respect when they claimed that cartoons should be left behind the second you reach drinking age. The gall. What will it take for the medium to become fully valid as an art form to some, if not Roger Deakins coming in to provide visual consultation? Basically the film's designated DP, and you can tell. He shot Skyfall soon after. Snubbed. Pairing his essence to Dean's capturing of scale was something I can't imagine anyone could have seen becoming a thing in the foreseeable future while watching Lilo and Stitch or The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. Imagine watching No Country for Old Men and think, gosh, you know whose input DreamWorks' next joint could use? Roger Deakins. The universe really works in mysterious ways. I call this a miracle movie not to imply that the film's quality is some sort of incident. I'm instead referring to that inexplicable mix of talents, people you'd hardly predict to ever collaborate, gathered to make the sort of film you'd have absolutely no interest or connection to if not for their involvement. I've never had this intrinsic fascination for Vikings, and me being into dragons has more to do with execution. How to Train Your Dragon taught me that animated movies too require strong direction and are sometimes better directed than the movies they reference or mimic. I love that it was this film teaching me such a thing. I love that it exists. In a purely directional and aesthetic sense, it just might be my favorite piece of dragon media. Good for an animated movie is not the compliment one believes. You're still throwing the whole medium under the bus. Get that most of the reasons why you like that movie are probably quite similar to the non-animated ones you hold so dearly. Its direction, score, writing, and all the aesthetic theory for you to better remember it, so show some respect. I believe the sentiment carried by the statement of good for an animated movie to be part of what brought us to the festering dystopia where live-action remakes financially thrive. Where do these people come from, you might ask? Well, those are your neighbors. They drive our cars. They have jobs. They vote. What else can we do but educate? As an assignment, I propose that you revisit an animated film that you recall enjoying, adoring, even as a child. Ideally one you haven't stumbled on for years, practically renewing the viewing experience. Pay attention to the way you feel, how strongly you still connect to the drawn or rendered manifestations, and if all is ideal, discover that nothing changed, yourself included. That's cinema.